I want a pair of the Birkenstocks that I wear, but with laces. So I was like, I'll just put them on. And I wore them to Paris for Fashion Week, and Virgil saw me wearing them, and he's like, yo, I gotta do it. And so he put the swoosh, and he said, put the Air Ortho, which I thought was pretty funny. Hi, my name is Chris Gibbs. I'm the owner of Union Los Angeles, and this is my life in sneakers. Born and raised in Canada, Ottawa, Canada. Moved to New York for college in '94. Met my now wife, then girlfriend, who was like, you need a real job. You need to be cooler. And she eventually got me a job working at Union. And that was in '96, and I never left. I'm still here. I was hired by James Jebbia, who had started Union with his then girlfriend, Marianne Fusco. But Marianne ran the day-to-day and pretty much taught me everything I knew, and that's who I worked with for the most part. But that was their store that they started in '89 together. This predates Supreme. There's basically like a little family tree. Union, Stussy, Supreme, Undefeated. Union was opened in '89 in New York by James and Marianne, but Eddie kind of ran the store there. Eddie moved to LA in '91 and opened up the Stussy Union. Sean Stussy had established a really good relationship with Eddie and James through the New York store. Eventually, they decided to open up Stussy shops that they ran. Later on, James goes to open up Supreme. So then obviously, James, who started Union, now has Supreme. He's running Stussy for Sean in New York. Eddie owns the LA Union and is running Stussy for Sean here in Los Angeles. Sneakers got so big in Union that basically Eddie teamed up with James Bond, who had K-Bond here, and basically started Undefeated as the sneaker extension to K-Bond and Union. And so at some point around 2009, when the recession hit, Eddie and I were talking. He offered me the opportunity to be able to take it over from him, buy it from him, in essence. I had already been doing so much for the store for so long that it was a seamless transition. No one would have known. Eddie, to this day, still gives me advice on a regular basis and is still super supportive. I suppose there's kind of two ways that I look at how, fashion and sneakers and what that all meant to me. I definitely remember the first time I got to make the decision of what shoe I was gonna buy for myself. It was in middle school. I had to have these Chuck Taylors, but even as a middle schooler, I was really into color. So I would never get the black or the white. I always wanted a weird color. Every 80s baby of a certain, elk eventually matriculates to Jordan. My first Jordan would have been a 3. So that would be the next pivot, and then getting into all those late 80s, the Jordans, the Nike Assaults. It wasn't until I started working at Union where I think that light switch got turned on to really thinking about fashion. It's funny because we kind of just told that story through the lens of our Dunk release, which was, I'm a student, I'm broke, I'm living in New York, I can barely pay rent. Dunks at that time were a very utilitarian shoe. It ended up becoming this uniform for young creatives, downtown creatives, because we're all broke, And so that was my entry into that. It wasn't really until I went to Japan for the first time in 2001 where I saw how Japan treated the Dunk, where they have the Brazils, yellow, and all these crazy colors. My mind exploded. And I was like, oh, this is insane. And that's when I really got into sneaker culture right there. Japan was an extremely early adopter of streetwear. And so we would sell a large majority of our product to Japanese students, to Japanese tourists, to Japanese parallel buyers. Today, it's reselling. Back then, it was called parallel buying. And parallel buying, the intention was to bring something that's not available from another geo, from another city, from another space, and offer it to people who want something different. And there wasn't a crazy markup. That's why it's called parallel buying. You bought it for $100, maybe you made an extra $20, but it was more about bringing something new. I would admit to anyone that I run Union through the lens of that guy and his first trip to Japan.
Talk about Your top 5 shoes.
My top 5. So just pull them out.
Yes, sir.
So I got the Mars Yards. Union here in LA, when these shoes launched, we launched this shoe. We did a full build out in the store. There was the shoes, there was a jacket, there was some bags, and we did a full kind of execution and activation in the store, much like what happens here all the time now, but this was absolutely the first. What I like about this shoe is I thought he did an incredible job of taking like the sensibilities of the old 80s silhouettes, but bringing it into a modern time on a modern outer sole. The fabrics are really dope. The colors are like, I can wear this shoe with anything, because the colors are kind of like so nondescript. Go to Huaraches. You might be surprised to see these in, but I think these have a special place in my heart from my high school basketball days. I definitely am into like kind of a boxy toe box vamp, and this would have been maybe one of the earlier exoskeleton shoes. And I really like, still to this day, I love the shape. I love the lines on this shoe. We've got, you know, shameless self-promotion, but we got my AJ1s. This has become my everyday shoe. The original design intention with these shoes was to make them look beat up, but I didn't have the balls to go through with it. So we just ended up doing like the antique sole, and we did the antiquing on the edge of the leather as kind of a hint to that. I'll admit I am spoiled. I have a number of pairs on ice. More than I'd like to admit. There isn't a day that hasn't gone by in the last 5 years where someone hasn't asked me if we still have ones. And the answer is no, because we don't. And some of those people are good friends. And some of those people might even be size 11. And they don't know how many 11s I have for myself. So sorry guys, but this is my baby, so I love these. We got my favorite, my Air Orthos. Rest in peace to Virgil. I'm a big Birkenstock guy, so that's my non-sneaker shoe that you'll see. One day, I went and bought a pair of these are the Bostons, the black leather Bostons. I'm not like a world-class customizer, no one would call me that, but I like cut the buckle off, because these are Bostons here, cut the buckle off, punched lace holes in them, because I was like, yo, wouldn't it be dope that, like, I want a pair of like the Birkenstocks that I wear, which would either be the Boston or the London. Actually, these are Bostons, these are Londons. Londons have but with laces. And they make a version of it, but I don't really like it. So I was like, I'll just put them on. And you know, this is right around when Virgil dropped the 10s. And so I was like, oh, I'll add the laces because that'll make it, you know, whatever. So I was wearing these a lot, and I wore them to Paris for Fashion Week, and Virgil saw me wearing them and he's like, yo, I gotta do it. And so he put the swoosh and he said, you know, put the Air Ortho, which I thought was pretty funny. So these are some favorites of mine, obviously for a nostalgic reason. Last but not least but not last, earlier on I said Chucks were kind of my first introduction into sneaker world. They're still my favorite. A while ago, Converse did a collaboration with Damien Hirst, and these are them, and it blew my mind. I loved the fabric. They used this really crazy fabric. Colors were like, I always like muted colors, so it wasn't this bright red, it was this kind of orangey muted red. So these are them. There it is.
From 5 to top 3.
Okay, I'm gonna remove these, and I'm gonna remove my Air Orthos.
Let's go to top 2. Let's take third place out. Bronze medal.
Bronze medal, Mars Yard.
Okay. So it's interesting.
I got 2 kids. You're gonna ask me which to choose between my 2 kids? Wow. I guess I'll keep the ones. Why not? 1A, 1B, but I'll keep those. Those have been my daily drivers since I made them. I wear them almost every day. So much so that I haven't been wearing my Chucks. We, as a store, you know, the preeminent streetwear store, would be very familiar with making collabs, carrying the collabs that everybody makes. So by the time I took over, it was, you know, like a easy muscle, a muscle that was used all the time. I did the 180s. So we did the Clerks pack, and I think that was 2006, and that was fun, awesome, dope, everything. Union was one of the first Adidas consortium members. We did a couple consortium shoes. We did a Converse, we did a Vans. We've had quite a few collaborations over the years, and it's always fun and it's always good to do it. But the Jordan team, I knew them because they'd come and they'd do like inspiration shopping at the store once a year. And then one year they were like, yo, can we take you for a coffee and pick your brain? And they really were trying to figure out apparel. And I think at one point they were like, well, what would you do? And I was like, yo, if I went to like the Rose Bowl and found like some dope, perfectly patinaed vintage Jordan t-shirts and sweatshirts, that's something I'd get pretty excited about. And then a couple months later, a box shows up at my office and it's a whole bunch of like patinaed Jordan stuff. And they're like, yo, like we took your notes. Those are samples. We want to work with you. What do you want to do? Like blue skies, what do you want to do? And I was like, all right, well, I got to tell you one thing. You can't separate the apparel from the footwear. You have to treat them equally. And if we treat them, and in doing so, we need to add a footwear to this capsule. Well, what shoe would you want to do? I was like, I want to do the one. They're like, really? You want to do the one? Because we had a bunch of flight stuff, and they're like, flight stuff's more like the 3 or the 4. I was like, you're getting too like nerdy on it. The intention of this design is not the year. Streetwear is just like more about a feeling. So I was like, the streetwear part of this is just, there's an era from 89 to 93 of just vintage Jordan stuff. And that era has to start with the thing that started it all, the one. They were like, yeah, let's do it. We put our all into the launch. We told the launch through the story of the Rose Bowl little thing we did and vintage. And I had no idea how much people were gonna come to appreciate this shoe and go crazy for it. No idea. I was blown away. So with the two, I got really inspired by like utilitarian work clothing and work uniforms where they had like labeling and like directional, you know, this is the purpose of this jacket or this shoe, and it would be written on the outside, like very like mil-spec. Mil-spec does that too. So I wanted to make sure we had all the labels all over the shoe. And then I kind of like the idea of like bringing some exo ideas. So we kind of made this area a little bit more industrial looking. I probably designed from a very familiar place. And what's familiar to me is my late 80s introduction to sneaker culture. Do I want to lean into that? Do I want to bring it up modern? Do I want to make it a little bit more sophisticated and make it more like fashion? And so I think with this one, I wanted to make it fashion. Streetwear is very alive. I'll say that. Streetwear is not a silo of fashion that is juxtaposed against other silos. Streetwear can be contemporary, it can be high fashion, it can be luxury, it can live in all of them. I think high fashion, they're not dumb. They're like, oh, that's what everybody wants? Like Gen X, Y, and Z are the ones spending money on fashion, not boomers anymore. So we have to make stuff that they're going to appreciate. So we have to speak in their language, and their language is streetwear right now. And so they've smartly started to make a lot of their collections through a streetwear veneer.
How do you think sneakers plays into this whole construct of fashion and streetwear and where everything's going? What do you see for the future of sneakers?
This is probably a weird way to answer it, but I think a lot about like South Park. And they had a couple episodes a couple years ago where they were suggesting is that like America's trapped in this cycle of remembering and the things that they were familiar to growing up with. Disney is maybe taking wild advantage of that right now, and it's just Star Wars, and it's Boba Fett, and if you know, and then it's the Stormtrooper, and then they're tapping into this thing that is for some reason, I don't know, I'm not a sociologist or a psychologist, but it seems to be this special moment in time for a lot of people, right? And so sneakers is that for a guy of a certain age, my age, I'm Gen X, right? So sneakers hits this chord for a Gen X kid. I think Gen Y and Gen Z, although they have their own take on it and they're definitely doing their own thing, they've taken a lot of cues from Gen X. And so sneakers is just this really special thing. They're the accoutrement to your fashion. They're the finishing piece. They're the cherry on top of every outfit. And so much so that you think about the cherry before you think about the outfit, which is kind of crazy. But
That was awesome.
yeah, thank you.